The rifle kicked against Tommy Reed's shoulder for the 10th time that morning, and once again his shot went wide of the target. The plasma bolt hit the dirt 2 meters to the left, creating a small crater that would soon join the dozens of others scattered around the practice range. Behind him, he could hear his squad mates snickering. "Reed couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat," muttered Corporal Davis, not bothering to lower his voice. "How did this guy even make it through basic training?" Tommy tried to ignore the comments as he adjusted his grip on the weapon. His hands were shaking slightly, which only made things worse. The more he thought about missing, the more likely he was to miss again. It was a cycle that had followed him through 6 months of active duty on Forward Base Delta. Captain Brooks walked over, his boots crunching on the rocky ground of the training area. The man had been patient with Tommy at first, but that patience had worn thin over the past few weeks. "Reed, what's the problem here? You've fired this weapon 1,000 times. "I don't know, sir," Tommy replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I line up the shot the same way every time, but it just doesn't go where I'm aiming." The captain sighed and looked at Tommy's stance. Nothing was obviously wrong with his form, but something was clearly not working. "Take a break. We'll try again this afternoon." Tommy nodded and set his rifle down on the weapons rack. As he walked toward the barracks, he could hear the other soldiers taking their turns at the range. Each shot rang out with precision, hitting the targets with satisfying thuds. It made Tommy feel even worse about his own performance. Inside the barracks, Tommy sat on his bunk and stared at the wall. His family had served in the military for 3 generations. His grandfather had fought in the Earth Liberation Wars, and his father had been a decorated officer in the Colonial Defense Force. They had both expected great things from Tommy when he enlisted. Instead, Tommy had become known as the soldier, who couldn't do anything right. He failed his physical fitness tests regularly, struggled with equipment maintenance, and couldn't seem to grasp even basic tactical concepts. The only reason he hadn't been discharged yet was because humanity needed every warm body they could get in the war against the Krex Empire. The Krex had appeared in human space 5 years ago, emerging from beyond the outer rim with ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. They were tall, insectoid creatures, with 4 arms and compound eyes that could see across multiple spectrums of light. Their technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities, and they seemed determined to claim every habitable world in the galaxy. Humanity had managed to slow their advance, but only barely. Every battle was a desperate struggle, and losses were mounting on both sides. Forward Base Delta was one of dozens of outposts scattered across the front lines, serving as early warning systems and staging areas for counterattacks. Tommy's thoughts were interrupted by an announcement over the base's communication system. "All personnel report to the main briefing room. Priority Alpha." Priority Alpha meant something important was happening. Tommy grabbed his gear and joined the stream of soldiers heading toward the central building. The briefing room was packed, with nearly 200 people by the time Captain Brooks took the stage. "Listen up, everyone," the captain began. "We've received orders to investigate unusual energy readings on Titan 7. The moon has been abandoned for 3 years, but our sensors are picking up power signatures that don't match any known human or Krex technology." Tommy felt a chill run down his spine. Unknown technology usually meant bad news in this part of space. The galaxy was full of ruins left behind by ancient civilizations, and most of them were dangerous. "We're sending 3 teams to investigate," Captain Brooks continued. "Each team will search a different sector of the moon. This is a reconnaissance mission only. If you find something, you report it and wait for backup. Nobody plays hero." Tommy's squad was assigned to the northern sector of Titan 7, an area that had once been home to a small mining colony. The colony had been evacuated when the Krex first appeared in the system, and it had been empty ever since. The trip to Titan 7 took 6 hours in a standard transport. Tommy spent most of the journey trying to clean his rifle and check his equipment. He wanted to be ready for whatever they might find. even though he suspected his squad mates would prefer he stay out of the way. Titan 7 was a gray, lifeless rock with a thin atmosphere that required breathing masks. The abandoned mining colony was spread across several kilometers of rough terrain, with empty buildings and rusted equipment scattered everywhere. It looked like the kind of place where nothing good could happen. Tommy's squad landed near the edge of the colony and began their search. They moved carefully from building to building, scanning for any signs of the energy readings that had brought them here. Most of the structures were empty, filled only with dust and debris. It was Corporal Davis who found the crashed ship. It was buried under a collapsed warehouse, hidden from casual observation, but visible to anyone who looked closely. The ship was unlike anything Tommy had ever seen before. It was smooth and organic-looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. "This definitely isn't human," said Private Martinez, running his scanner over the hull. "But it's not Krex, either. The metal composition is completely different." Captain Brooks ordered the team to clear away the debris and find an entrance. The ship was larger than it had first appeared, stretching deep underground. When they finally found a way inside, they discovered chambers filled with strange crystalline pods. Each pod contained something that looked like a jellyfish made of light. The creatures were beautiful but alien, floating in some kind of stasis fluid that glowed with soft colors. Tommy counted at least 50 pods in the main chamber, with corridors leading to other sections they hadn't explored yet. "Command needs to see this," Captain Brooks said, activating his communication device. "We've found something big." But before he could finish his transmission, the pods began to crack open. The jellyfish-like creatures emerged slowly, drifting through the air, like living ghosts. They moved with purpose, spreading throughout the chamber and approaching the human soldiers. Everyone started backing toward the exit, but Tommy tripped over a piece of debris. He hit his head on a sharp rock and felt warm blood running down his face. As his vision blurred and consciousness faded, he saw one of the creatures floating down toward him. The last thing he remembered was a gentle touch against his forehead, and then everything went dark. Tommy's dreams were filled with colors he had never seen before. He floated through spaces that seemed to exist between reality and imagination, surrounded by gentle whispers in languages he couldn't understand. Sometimes he felt like he was flying, and other times he felt like he was drowning in warm light. When he finally woke up, he was lying in the medical bay back at Forward Base Delta. His head was wrapped in bandages, and there was a dull ache behind his eyes that made it hard to focus. Dr. Wilson was checking his vital signs when he opened his eyes. "Welcome back, soldier," the doctor said with a smile. "You gave us quite a scare. How do you feel?" Tommy tried to sit up but immediately felt dizzy. "My head hurts. What happened to me?" "You suffered a concussion when you fell in that alien ship. Captain Brooks found you unconscious and brought you back for treatment. You've been out for 2 days. 2 days." Tommy couldn't believe he had lost so much time. "What about those creatures we found? The ones in the pods?" Dr. Wilson's expression grew serious. "Most of them died when they were exposed to our atmosphere. The science team managed to capture a few specimens for study, but they didn't survive long either. Whatever they weren't compatible with human environment." Tommy nodded, though he wasn't sure why he felt disappointed by this news. There was something at the edge of his memory, a feeling that he had experienced something important in that ship. But every time he tried to focus on it, the memory slipped away like water through his fingers. Over the next few days, Tommy went through the standard recovery process. He had medical scans, psychological evaluations, and fitness tests to make. Sure, the concussion hadn't caused any permanent damage. Everything came back normal, which should have been good news. But Tommy didn't feel normal. There was something different about the way he perceived the world around him. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds were clearer, and he found himself noticing details he had never paid attention to before. When he mentioned this to Dr. Wilson, the doctor assured him it was a common side effect of head trauma that would fade with time. The first sign that something had really changed came during a routine training exercise. Tommy's squad was practicing urban combat scenarios in a mock village built on the base. They were supposed to clear buildings of simulated enemy forces while avoiding civilian targets. Tommy had always been terrible at these exercises. He moved too slowly, made too much noise, and usually ended up getting his entire squad killed in the simulation. But this time was different. As soon as the exercise began, Tommy felt a strange tingling sensation in his mind. Suddenly, he could sense the positions of the enemy targets even before he saw them. He knew which doors would be booby-trapped and which windows offered the best firing positions. It was as if someone was whispering tactical advice directly into his brain. His performance was still far from perfect. His physical skills hadn't improved, and he still fumbled with his equipment. But his decision-making was remarkably better. He led his squad through the scenario with an efficiency that surprised everyone, including himself. "Reed, what's gotten into you?" asked Corporal Davis after the exercise was over. "You actually seem to know what you were doing out there." Tommy shrugged, not sure how to explain the strange intuition that had guided him. "I guess I'm finally learning something." Captain Brooks was equally puzzled by Tommy's improved performance. During the debrief, he questioned Tommy about his tactical decisions. Tommy tried to explain his reasoning, but the truth was that many of his choices had been based on gut feelings rather than conscious analysis. "Your instincts were solid," the captain admitted. "If you can maintain this level of performance, we might finally make a real soldier out of you." Tommy hoped that was true, but he wasn't sure he understood what was happening to him. The strange intuition seemed to come and go without warning. Sometimes he would have flashes of insight that proved remarkably accurate, and other times he felt just as lost and confused as ever. The next few weeks brought a series of small improvements. Tommy's marksmanship scores slowly began to rise. He started anticipating enemy movements in training simulations with uncanny accuracy. His tactical suggestions during briefings, while unconventional, showed surprising insight into combat situations. But there were also strange moments that Tommy couldn't explain. Sometimes he would catch himself staring at the stars, feeling homesick for places he had never been. Other times he would hear voices speaking in alien languages that somehow seemed familiar. These episodes were brief and disorienting, leaving him wondering if he was losing his mind. The first real test came when Krek's raiders attacked a civilian transport convoy in the Proxima system. Tommy's unit was dispatched as backup support for the main rescue force. It was his first actual combat mission since the incident on Titan VII. The battle was chaos from the beginning. The Kreks had ambushed the convoy with 3 fast attack ships, crippling the escorts and trapping the civilian vessels in open space. The rescue force arrived to find themselves outnumbered and outgunned. Tommy's squad was assigned to board one of the damaged civilian ships and evacuate the survivors. As they approached in their assault shuttle, Krek's fighters swarmed around them like angry insects. The shuttle shook under enemy fire, and Tommy could hear the pilot cursing over the intercom. "We're taking heavy damage," the pilot announced. "I don't think we can make it to the docking port." That's when Tommy felt the tingling sensation in his mind again, stronger than ever before. Suddenly, he could see the battle unfolding around them with perfect clarity. He knew exactly where each Krek's fighter would be in the next few seconds, as if he was reading from a tactical manual written in his head. "Bank left 30 degrees and dive," Tommy called out to the pilot. "There's a gap in their formation at bearing 270. The pilot followed Tommy's instructions, and the shuttle slipped through the Krek's formation like a needle through cloth. They reached the civilian ship and began evacuating passengers while the battle raged around them. During the evacuation, Tommy moved with a fluid grace that surprised his squad mates. He seemed to know exactly where to be and when to be there, guiding civilians to safety while avoiding enemy fire. For brief moments, his rifle found targets with impossible accuracy, picking off Krek's boarders who were threatening the evacuation route. "Reed, how did you know they would be there?" asked Private Martinez after Tommy had eliminated a group of enemies that had been moving to ambush them. Tommy stared at his rifle in amazement. He had made 3 perfect shots in a row, something he had never done before in his entire military career. I don't know. I just felt like they would be. The evacuation was a success, and Tommy's squad managed to save over 100 civilian lives. During the flight back to base, Captain Brooks reviewed the mission recordings with growing amazement. "Reed, I've never seen anything like what you did out there," the captain said. "Your tactical awareness was off the charts. It was like you could predict the enemy's movements before they made them." Tommy nodded, but he was troubled by what had happened. The strange intuition was getting stronger, and he was beginning to suspect it wasn't entirely his own. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he could swear he felt another presence in his mind, a presence that felt ancient and wise, but also somehow lonely. He decided not to mention these feelings to anyone. The last thing he wanted was to be pulled off, active duty for more psychological evaluations. But deep down, Tommy knew that whatever had happened to him in that alien ship was far from over. Something was changing inside him, and he had the feeling that the real journey was just beginning. The voice came to Tommy during his sleep, soft and musical like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. At first he thought he was dreaming, but the voice persisted even as he woke up in his narrow bunk. "Do not be afraid," the voice whispered inside, his mind. "I have been waiting for you to be ready." Tommy sat up quickly, looking around the empty barracks. It was 3 in the morning, and his squad mates were all sound asleep. But the voice was as clear as if someone was sitting right next to him. "Who are you?" he whispered, feeling foolish for talking to empty air. "I am Echo," the voice replied. "I am your partner now, though you did not choose this bond willingly. For that, I apologize." Tommy's heart started racing. He remembered the alien ship, the floating creatures, and the moment before he lost consciousness. "You're one of those things from the pods. I am Veil Runner, as were my people long ago. What you call things were my kin. Though they are gone now, their essence faded when they could not find suitable partners among your kind." Tommy felt a chill run down his spine. "What makes me suitable?" There was a pause, and Tommy could sense Echo searching for the right words. "Your mind is flexible where others are rigid. Your spirit adapts where others resist. What your people see as weakness, I see as strength." Over the following days, Echo began to share fragments of memories that belonged to a civilization lost to time. Tommy learned that the Veil Runners had once been a peaceful species that lived in harmony with their symbiotic partners. They had been explorers and healers, traveling between stars to help younger civilizations develop and grow. But they had encountered the ancestors of the Krex Empire, a brutal species that conquered everything in their path. The war that followed had lasted for centuries, devastating both civilizations. In the end, the Veil Runners had retreated into hidden sanctuaries, placing themselves in stasis to wait for a time when they might find new partners among the younger species of the galaxy. "Why didn't you choose the other soldiers?" Tommy asked during one of their mental conversations. "They're stronger and more skilled than I am." "Strength of body matters little," Echo replied. "Strength of spirit is what creates true warriors. Your Captain Brooks thinks in straight lines. Corporal Davis follows rules without question. You think in curves and spirals. You find solutions where others see only problems." Tommy wasn't sure he believed that, but he couldn't argue with the results. His performance in training continued to improve as he learned to work with Echo's guidance. The alien entity could process information at incredible speeds, analyzing tactical situations and predicting enemy behavior patterns with startling accuracy. But Echo was not simply enhancing Tommy's natural abilities. The symbiotic relationship was changing them both. Tommy found that he could sense Echo's emotions and memories, while Echo began to understand human concepts like humor and loyalty. They were becoming something new, a fusion of human creativity and alien wisdom. The true test of their partnership came when the Kreks launched a massive assault on Forward Base Delta. Long-range sensors detected a fleet of enemy warships approaching, the system far larger than anything the base had faced before. It was clear that this would not be a quick raid, but a full-scale invasion. Captain Brooks called all personnel to battle stations as the base's defensive systems powered up. Energy. Shields flickered to life around critical installations, and automated turrets emerged from hidden bunkers. But everyone knew that the base's defenses would not hold against a fleet of that size. Tommy joined his squad at their assigned defensive position, a bunker complex overlooking the main landing field. Through Echo's enhanced senses, he could feel the approaching enemy ships like a storm front moving across the void. The alien presence in his mind was tense with anticipation and old memories of similar battles fought long ago. The Kreks arrived with the fury of a hurricane. Their ships swept down from orbit in perfect formation, unleashing streams of plasma, fire that lit up the night sky. The base's shields held for the first few minutes, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming fire. Enemy dropships began landing troops throughout the complex. The Kreks soldiers were tall and insectoid, moving with mechanical precision as they spread out to secure their landing zones. Their weapons fired bolts of superheated gas that could punch through most human armor. Tommy's squad took cover as the first wave of attackers approached their position. Through his rifle scope, Tommy could see the enemy advancing in a standard tactical formation. But Echo was showing him something else. The subtle tells and patterns that revealed the true nature of the Kreks' assault. "They're moving too perfectly," Tommy muttered to himself. "What did you say?" asked Corporal Davis, crouched behind the next firing position. Tommy studied the approaching enemy through Echo's enhanced perception. "They're not adapting to the terrain. They're following a preset attack pattern like a computer program." That gave Tommy an idea. If the Kreks were following programmed tactics, then their movements could be predicted and countered. He began calling out instructions to his squad mates, directing their fire to specific points where the enemy would be most vulnerable. "Davis, fire at the third pillar in 10 seconds. Martinez, target the left flank when they reach the red marker. Henderson, wait for my signal, then hit the leader." His squad mates looked confused but followed his orders. The result was devastating. Tommy's precisely timed instructions allowed them to catch the Kreks formation at exactly the wrong moment, disrupting their advance and forcing them to take cover. But Tommy was just getting started. Working with Echo, he began to perceive the entire battle as a complex pattern that could be read and manipulated. He could sense the flow of combat across the base, identifying weak points in both the human defense and the Kreks' assault. When a group of enemy soldiers tried to flank their position, Tommy was waiting for them. He moved with fluid grace, his rifle finding targets with impossible precision. Each shot was perfectly placed, and each movement flowed naturally into the next. It was as if he was dancing rather than fighting. "How is he doing that?" Henderson whispered in amazement, as Tommy eliminated an entire squad of Krek soldiers single-handedly. Tommy could barely hear his squad mate's voice over the rush of sensory information flowing through his mind. Through Echo's perception, he could see the heat signatures of approaching enemies, feel the vibrations of their footsteps through the ground, and even detect the electromagnetic signatures of their weapons. But the most remarkable ability was his growing understanding of Krek's battle language. Echo's genetic memory contained fragments of information about the ancient war between their species, including knowledge of enemy communication protocols. Tommy found that he could actually understand what the Kreks soldiers were saying to each other over their communication channels. He used this knowledge to stay one step ahead of every enemy move. When the Kreks tried to coordinate a flanking maneuver, Tommy heard their plans and repositioned his squad accordingly. When they called for reinforcements, he knew exactly where the new troops would arrive. The battle raged for hours, but gradually the tide began to turn. Tommy's tactical insights were being relayed to other defensive positions, allowing the human forces to anticipate and counter enemy strategies with unprecedented effectiveness. What had seemed like an inevitable defeat was becoming a costly stalemate. As dawn broke over the battlefield, the surviving Krex forces began to withdraw to their ships. They had taken heavy casualties and failed to achieve their primary objectives. For the first time in the war, a major Krex assault had been completely repelled. Captain Brooks found Tommy sitting in the ruins of his defensive position, staring out at the smoking battlefield. The young soldier looked exhausted but somehow different, as if the battle had changed him in fundamental ways. "Reed, what you did out there," the captain began, then stopped. He wasn't sure how to put his amazement into words. Tommy looked up at his commanding officer with eyes that seemed older and wiser than they had been just hours before. "I had help, sir. More help than you might believe." The captain nodded, though he didn't fully understand what Tommy meant. All he knew was that the worst soldier in his unit had somehow become their greatest asset. The implications of that transformation would take time to fully comprehend. As the base began the long process of cleanup and repair, Tommy felt Echo's presence in his mind like a warm glow. They had passed their first real test together, and both of them had emerged stronger from the experience. But Tommy sensed that this was only the beginning. The bond between him and Echo was still growing, still evolving. Whatever they were becoming, it was something the galaxy had never seen before. General Hayes arrived at Forward Base Delta 3 days after the battle, bringing with her a team of scientists, medical specialists, and intelligence officers. Word of Tommy's extraordinary performance had reached the highest levels of human command, and everyone wanted to understand what had made the transformation possible. Tommy found himself in the uncomfortable position of being both a hero and a test subject. He spent hours each day in medical scanners while doctors searched for any trace of alien influence in his body. The results were always the same: perfectly normal human physiology with no sign of foreign organisms or technological implants. "This is impossible," muttered Dr. Chen, the lead scientist on the research team. "The battle recordings clearly show enhanced reflexes, impossible accuracy, and tactical awareness far beyond normal human capabilities. But we can't find any physical explanation for these improvements." Tommy could have told them about Echo, but he chose to keep that secret. The alien entity had warned him that revealing their partnership too early could lead to dangerous experiments or attempts to forcibly separate them. Instead, Tommy claimed that his head injury had somehow unlocked hidden potential. "Sometimes, trauma can cause unusual neural development," he explained to the medical team. "Maybe the concussion rewired my brain in some way." The doctors weren't entirely convinced by this explanation, but they had no better theories to offer. Meanwhile, General Hayes was more interested in practical applications than scientific understanding. "I don't care how it happened," she told Captain Brooks during a private meeting. "I care about whether it can be replicated and whether Reed can train other soldiers to perform at the same level." Tommy soon found himself assigned to a new unit specifically created to study and develop unconventional warfare techniques. The Special Tactics Division was composed of soldiers who had shown unique abilities or innovative thinking in combat situations. Tommy was both the newest member and the unofficial leader of the group. His first mission with the new unit was to infiltrate a Krex weapons research facility on the planet Kepler Prime. Intelligence reports suggested that the enemy was developing new types of energy weapons that could tip the balance of the war in their favor. The facility was heavily defended and located deep underground, making a conventional assault impossible. Tommy's team consisted of 6 specialists, each with their own particular skills. There was Silva, a demolitions expert who could create explosives from common materials. Park was a computer systems specialist who could hack almost any electronic device. Rogers was a sniper with an almost supernatural ability to make impossible shots. The others were equally talented in their own areas. But as they prepared for the mission, Tommy realized that his partnership with Echo gave him advantages that went far beyond enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness. The alien entity's knowledge of ancient technology allowed Tommy to understand systems and devices that were completely foreign to human science. During the infiltration phase, Tommy discovered he could interface directly with both human and Krek's computer networks by placing his hands on access panels. Echo's consciousness could navigate through electronic systems like water, flowing through pipes, gathering information, and manipulating controls with impossible precision. "How are you doing that?" Park whispered as Tommy opened a sealed security door without using any of the standard hacking tools. Tommy looked down at his hands, still trying to understand the process himself. "I'm not sure. It's like I can feel the electrical patterns in the system and convince them to change." The deeper they went into the facility, the more Tommy's abilities manifested. He could phase partially out of normal space, becoming temporarily invisible to most sensors. His movements became fluid and graceful, allowing him to slip through security systems that should have been impossible to bypass. Echo's presence in his mind was stronger than ever, sharing memories and knowledge from the ancient war between their peoples. Tommy learned that the Veil Runners had developed their technology through centuries of cooperation with their symbiotic partners, creating devices that responded to thought and intention rather than mechanical input. The mission took an unexpected turn when they discovered that the Kreks weren't just developing new weapons. They were experimenting with captured Veil Runner technology, trying to create their own enhanced soldiers through forced symbiosis with alien organisms. Tommy stood in a laboratory filled with stasis pods similar to the ones they had found on Titan 7. But these pods contained Krek subjects who had been infected with captured Veil Runner entities. The results were horrific. Twisted creatures that were neither fully Kreks nor properly symbiotic, driven mad by the forced bonding process. "They don't understand what they're doing," Tommy said, feeling Echo's distress through their mental link. "The bonding has to be voluntary based on compatibility and trust. They're destroying both species in their experiments." The team quickly planted their explosive charges and prepared to escape, but they were discovered by Krek security forces before they could reach the surface. A running battle ensued through the facility's corridors, with Tommy's enhanced abilities being pushed to their limits. During the firefight, Tommy experienced what Echo called perfect synchronization for the first time. His consciousness merged completely with the alien entity, creating a single unified being that combined human intuition with Veil Runner wisdom. He moved like liquid lightning, anticipating every enemy attack and responding with moves that seemed impossible. Tommy could phase in and out of visibility, making him nearly impossible to target. He could sense enemy positions through solid walls and predict their movements with perfect accuracy. Most remarkably, he could communicate directly with both human and Krek's technology, turning enemy defense systems against their operators. The team escaped the facility just before Silva's. Explosives destroyed the underground complex. As they flew away in their stolen Krek's transport, Tommy's teammates stared at him with a mixture of awe and concern. "Reed, what's happening to you?" asked Rogers. "You're moving like you're not entirely human anymore." Tommy looked at his reflection in the transport's window and saw his own eyes glowing with a faint inner light. "I'm becoming something new. Something that's never existed before in this galaxy." During the flight back to human space, Echo shared more of its people's history with Tommy. The Veil Runners had once been explorers and teachers, helping younger species develop their potential through symbiotic partnerships. They had never sought to conquer or control, only to guide and enhance. "Your species has great potential," Echo told him. "But you are still young and impulsive. My people hope to help humanity grow beyond its limitations, to become something greater than either species could achieve alone." Tommy understood now why Echo had chosen him specifically. The alien entity hadn't been looking for the strongest or most skilled human partner. It had been looking for someone who could adapt, who could embrace change and growth rather than fighting against it. "What happened to your people in the war?" Tommy asked. Echo's response was filled with ancient sadness. "We were too few and too peaceful. The Krek's ancestors were numerous and aggressive. In the end, we had to choose between becoming like them or accepting extinction. We chose a third path. We went into hiding, waiting for a time when we might find partners among species that were ready for true cooperation." The implications of this revelation were staggering. If other Veil Runner entities still existed in hidden stasis chambers throughout the galaxy, they could potentially create an entire army of enhanced human soldiers. But Echo warned that such partnerships could not be forced or rushed. Each bonding must be chosen freely by both partners, the alien explained. The process requires trust, compatibility, and genuine desire for growth. Your Captain Brooks could never accept such a partnership because his mind is too rigid. Corporal Davis would resist because he fears change. Tommy realized that he had become something unprecedented, the first successful human Veil Runner partnership in galactic history. The responsibility was both exciting and terrifying. He was no longer just a soldier fighting for humanity's survival. He was a bridge between species, a living example of what cooperation could achieve. As their transport approached human space, Tommy felt a new sense of purpose settling over him. The war against the Kreks was far from over, but now there was hope for something more than mere survival. There was a chance for humanity to evolve, to become part of something larger and more wonderful than anything they could achieve alone. But first, they would have to survive the challenges that lay ahead. Tommy sensed that the Kreks had learned about his abilities from the destruction of their research facility. They would be coming for him specifically, determined to capture or kill the human who had bonded with their ancient enemy. The real war was just beginning. The alarm began screaming across Earth's orbital defense stations at 0347 hours, jolting billions of people from their sleep. Admiral Foster stood in the command center, watching in horror as sensors detected the largest Kreks fleet ever assembled. "Emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. How many ships?" she asked her tactical officer. "Over 2,000 confirmed contacts, Admiral. Dreadnoughts, carriers, assault ships. It's their entire fleet." Tommy felt the news through his mental link with Echo before the official reports reached his unit. The alien entity was agitated, sharing visions of similar moments from the ancient war when Krek's armadas had descended upon Veil Runner worlds. "They know about us," Echo whispered in Tommy's mind. "They have come not just to conquer, but to capture the symbiotic technology they believe you possess." Tommy was no longer stationed at Forward Base Delta. After his success at the Krek's research facility, he had been transferred to Earth to help establish the Symbiote Corps, a new military unit built around soldiers who could potentially bond with Veil Runner entities. The program had been challenging from the start. Echo had been secretly communicating with other dormant symbiotes hidden throughout human space, but finding compatible human partners was proving difficult. Most soldiers were too rigid in their thinking or too afraid of change to accept the bonding process. The first successful candidate had been Private Lisa Park, a communications specialist who had been facing discharge for her unconventional methods. Like Tommy, she had been considered a failure by military standards, but her flexible mindset and natural empathy made her an ideal partner for a Veil Runner entity that called itself Whisper. Next came Corporal Mike Torres, a medic who had been struggling with PTSD after witnessing the massacre of a civilian colony. His ability to feel deep emotional connections made him compatible with an entity called Harmony, which specialized in healing and regeneration. Within 6 months, the Symbiote Corps had grown to include 12 human Veil Runner partnerships. Each pair was unique, combining human creativity with alien wisdom in ways that produced extraordinary results. But they were still a tiny force compared to the massive Krek's fleet now approaching Earth. "We need more time," Tommy told General. Hayes as they watched the enemy advance on the main tactical display. The Corps isn't ready for a battle of this scale. Time is the one thing we don't have, the general replied grimly. The Kreks will be here in 18 hours. Either we stop them here or humanity falls. Tommy felt Echo's presence surge through his consciousness, bringing with it ancient memories of the last great battle between their peoples. The Veil Runners had faced a similar moment of desperation, and they had found a way to turn their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. There are more, Echo told him urgently. Hidden sanctuaries throughout this system, places where my people waited in stasis. But the awakening process is dangerous without proper preparation. Tommy understood what Echo was suggesting. They could potentially create dozens of new human Veil Runner partnerships in the hours before the battle, but the rushed bonding process might kill both species involved. It was a desperate gamble with terrible risks. How many people would we need? Tommy asked aloud, drawing confused looks from the other officers in the command center. General Hayes frowned. Reed, who are you talking to? Tommy had kept Echo's existence secret for months, but now there was no choice. The survival of both species depended on revealing the truth. I'm talking to my partner, General, the alien entity that's been bonded with me since Titan 7. The room fell silent as Tommy explained everything. The Veil Runners, the symbiotic relationships, and the hidden sanctuaries scattered throughout human space. Some officers looked skeptical, others appeared frightened, but General Hayes listened with the calculating mind of a career military strategist. How many additional partnerships could we create? She asked when Tommy finished his explanation. Maybe 50, if we can find compatible volunteers. But the process has to be voluntary. People who are too afraid or too rigid will reject the bonding, and both partners could die. General Hayes activated the base-wide communication system. All personnel, report to the main assembly hall immediately. We have 18 hours to save our species, and we're going to need volunteers for the most dangerous mission in human history. The assembly hall was packed with over 3,000 soldiers, technicians, and support staff. General Hayes explained. The situation in stark terms. Earth was about to be invaded by a force that outnumbered humanity's defenders by 10 to 1. Conventional tactics would fail, but there was an alternative that might give them a fighting chance. Tommy stood before the assembled crowd and told his story. He demonstrated his enhanced abilities, phasing partially out of visibility and interfacing with the hall's electronic systems through touch alone. Then he explained what they were asking people to volunteer for. The bonding process will change you permanently, he said. You'll still be human, but you'll also be something more. Some of you might not survive the process, and even if you do survive, there's no guarantee we can win this battle. Despite the risks, nearly 500 people volunteered immediately. Tommy and the existing Symbiote Corps members worked frantically to identify the most compatible candidates, looking for individuals who showed flexibility, creativity, and emotional openness. The first emergency awakening took place in a hidden chamber beneath the Sahara Desert. Tommy and Echo guided the process as dormant Veil Runner entities emerged from stasis pods that had been hidden for millennia. The alien beings were weak from their long sleep, but they responded to Echo's call for help. The bonding process was unlike anything Tommy had experienced before. Instead of the gradual integration he had undergone, these new partnerships formed in minutes. Volunteer soldiers lay in specially prepared chambers, while Veil Runner entities merged with their nervous systems in bursts of light and energy. Some attempts failed tragically. 3 volunteers died when their minds rejected the alien presence, and 2 Veil Runner entities faded away when they couldn't establish proper connections. But most of the bonding succeeded, creating new hybrid beings that combined human determination with alien wisdom. By the time the Kreks fleet reached Earth's orbital defenses, the Symbiote Corps had grown to include 63 human Veil Runner partnerships. They were still vastly outnumbered, but they represented something the galaxy had never seen before, a true alliance between species working in perfect harmony. The battle began with devastating Krex bombardments that overwhelmed Earth's defensive shields within the first hour. Enemy dropships descended toward major population centers while human forces struggled to mount an effective resistance. It looked like the war would be over before it truly began, but then the symbiote core entered the fight, and everything changed. Tommy led the first wave, his enhanced senses allowing him to navigate through the chaos of orbital combat, like a dancer moving to unheard music. Working with Echo, he could predict enemy ship movements and coordinate attacks with impossible precision. His team moved through the Krex formations like ghosts, striking at critical targets and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Lisa Park and Whisper specialized in electronic warfare, turning Krex communication systems against themselves and creating confusion in enemy ranks. Mike Torres and Harmony focused on keeping human defenders alive, using alien healing techniques to save soldiers who should have died from their wounds. Each partnership brought unique abilities to the battle. Some could phase through solid matter, others could manipulate electromagnetic fields, and a few could even bend light around themselves to become effectively invisible. But their greatest strength was their ability to work together as a unified force. The Krex had expected to face human defenders using conventional tactics and technology. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that moved like liquid, thought like a collective mind, and adapted to new situations faster than their computers could calculate responses. "What are these creatures?" demanded Supreme Commander Vex, as he watched his forces being systematically dismantled by what should have been an inferior enemy. His tactical officer studied the battle recordings with growing alarm. They appear to be humans, but their capabilities are far beyond anything we've encountered before. They're using some form of enhancement technology that our sensors cannot detect. Tommy felt the tide of battle turning as more human forces began to rally behind the symbiote core. Seeing their enhanced comrades performing impossible feats of combat inspired regular soldiers to fight with renewed determination. The defense of Earth was becoming a symbol of humanity's refusal to surrender. But the real turning point came when Tommy confronted Supreme Commander Vex in personal combat aboard the Krex flagship. The enemy commander was a massive creature, over 3 meters tall with 4 powerful arms and chitin armor that could deflect most human weapons. "You are the abomination that has bonded with our ancient enemy," Vex growled as they faced each other in the ship's command center. "Your death will end this resistance." Tommy felt Echo's presence merge completely with his consciousness as they prepared for the final confrontation. "We are not an abomination," he replied calmly. "We are evolution." The fight was brief, but spectacular. Vex was a skilled warrior with centuries of combat experience, but he fought like a machine following programmed responses. Tommy and Echo moved like living art, their actions flowing seamlessly from defense to attack in patterns that seemed to follow musical rhythms rather than martial logic. When Vex finally fell, his dying words revealed the truth that would reshape the galaxy. How can cooperation be stronger than conquest? How can partnership overcome domination? Tommy knelt beside the fallen commander, feeling genuine sadness for a creature that had never learned the difference between strength and power. Because when two become one willingly, they become greater than the sum of their parts. When one conquers another, both become less than they were before. The destruction of the Krex flagship sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. For the first time in their species' history, they had encountered an opponent that was fundamentally different from themselves. They had built an empire on the principle that might makes right, but the symbiote core had proven that cooperation could triumph over domination. The surviving Krex ships began to withdraw, but Tommy surprised everyone by ordering the human forces not to pursue them. Instead, he opened communication channels to the retreating fleet. "This war doesn't have to continue," he broadcast to the Krex commanders. "We've proven that there are alternatives to conquest and submission. We're willing to share what we've learned, to help your people find a different path." The Krex response was confusion and disbelief. Their entire civilization was built around the concept of superior species dominating inferior ones. The idea of voluntary cooperation between equals was alien to their way of thinking. But seeds of change had been planted. In the months that followed, small groups of Krex began to approach human space under flags of truce. They came seeking to understand how the impossible had been achieved, how weak humans had become stronger than their technologically superior empire. Tommy found himself serving as an ambassador between species, helping to establish the first tentative diplomatic contacts between humans and Krex. The process was slow and difficult, but it marked the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The Symbiote Corps became the foundation for a new type of military organization, one based on cooperation rather than hierarchy. They served not just as soldiers but as teachers, showing both humans and aliens that strength could be found in unity rather than domination. Tommy often stood on the observation deck of the orbital station that had become the headquarters for interspecies cooperation, looking out at the stars and feeling Echo's contentment through their shared consciousness. They had come so far from that day on Titan VII when a failed soldier had accidentally stumbled into his destiny. "What happens next?" Tommy asked his alien partner. Echo's response was filled with hope and anticipation. "Now we grow. Now we teach. Now we show the galaxy that evolution is possible for any species willing to embrace change. The age of conquest is ending, and the age of cooperation has begun." Tommy smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, species that resisted change, and individuals who preferred the old ways of conflict and domination. But for the first time since the war began, the future held promise instead of merely survival. The weakest soldier had become humanity's greatest teacher, and the galaxy would never be the same.